Hey guys, what's up? Ben with Bigstuff3 here. So today we're going to have a video going over the data logger section inside your project. And why is this important? Well, if you can't interpret the data that you're looking at, you're probably not going to be able to make the most decisive decisions on what to do based on what you're seeing in your tune-up, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to have a video going over how to look at all your data, see what's going on with it, how to bounce around between all the tables, curves, and how to make some edits to your project also as well, okay? So inside your project, we have a graphing and logging tab here underneath the startup and idle button, and inside here is where you can open up any data logs, whether you record them to your laptop or you pull them from your data logger itself on the ECU. So you're going to have an open data log folder here. Inside there, you're going to go into your data log folder, pop out a file, and you're going to load it up right here, okay? So the first thing you're going to notice here is that all of our data is on the left in this view. All of your tables and curves that you can edit are over here on the right. And then all of your data is down below as far as all the different field points. So how are we going to get all this stuff configured? Well, we've got two different sections to look at. First here is this little log viewing settings gear icon below the notes, okay? So you're going to want to click on that. This is going to be all the different things we can use to set up the different ways your logger's configured, okay? So we're going to get into all this here in a second. The next here is this question mark, and the question mark has all of your hotkeys. Now, this can show you how to advance one, go back one on the recording, but typically what I like to use the hotkeys for is the up and down arrow just to zoom in and zoom out, okay? So if I zoom in here, I can hit the up arrow and zoom in really tight. If I go back out, I can zoom out with the down arrow, okay? Just depends on if you like to use that or not, but I use those two hotkeys all the time, all right? So let's go back here into the gear icon, and we're going to get into the graphing view and layout here first, okay? I like the 2D table view, and what that means again is all your data is over here on the left, your project configuration stuff is over here on the right, and then all of your different data points are all down below, all right? If I was to choose something else, if let's just say I went to the 1D or one table view, okay, now all my data is all on the left-hand side, all my points are stuffed down here on the bottom right-hand corner, and then all my tables and curves and everything that I would use to adjust inside my tune-up is all displayed over here. Okay, depends on how you want to view it. It just can be configured either way. It'll work fine either way. The other view that you can have is a no table view, and now we're just simply looking at the data. We don't have any project tables, curves, anything up. This is just simply data that we're looking at here as far as the actual logger itself. So I prefer the 2D table view. This way I've got all my tables, curves on the right. I've got my data down below. Then I actually have my log over here on the left-hand side, okay? Next thing is here, you can actually export or import the settings of this logger. So if I was to export the settings, I could save all my quick view tabs, my min and max settings, viewing preferences. This is basically going to set up a file of how I configure this logger. So if I want to take all these configuration settings into another project, I could do that as well, okay? Same thing if you want to import it. If you wanted to import in those settings, you could have created one from the laptop and brought them into this one as well, okay? Next one here is the mouse wheel action. Again, the mouse wheel defaults to a zoom in, zoom out. You can also do a page data forward back. The zoom in, graph in and out is the typical one that we typically will use, okay? The show 50% graph line, basically what this does is this establishes a 50% line there inside the data logger. You can see that dotted line right there. It's up to you if you want to use that or not. I typically do not use that. So I'll zoom back in on that run right there. Okay, the graph text options here, I like to show the graph text without the min and max. If I show the graph text, you're going to see you can have all these different data points pop up as far as maximums and minimums. I prefer not have that. I like having as much data shown on the log as possible. You can have that displayed, or we can also go with a no text values only. So you can see here I've got values changing up here, but there is no text on the logger screen itself. So I like to show graph text without the min max. Put that back there. The trace line style, what this does is lets you establish a thickness of line width to the actual data logging point itself. So I like to sit on a number 3. If I go to a number 1, you'll see here that all the data log points are very small as far as the actual line goes. I like looking at it with a number 3. If you went to number 5, it would be really thick. So that's not my style. I like looking at it with a number 3. And that to me looks really nice right there. Next thing you want to do is called a field limits editor. So what the field limit editor does is it lets us establish the min and maximums of all of these data log points. Okay, so when we created the logger, we actually established a lot of minimums and maximums of these points. Okay, there's no auto scale involved. Now, if the point is set up to auto scale, it may push it out into a section of the logger view that doesn't look right. So what we do is we actually establish min and maxes for the default points that we have, but some may be in the auto view. So a good example of this would be in the EGT section here. Okay, I've got this red line right down here. Okay, this red line is actually a sensor that's actually reading lower than the others. Okay, so everything else is around 1700 degrees. This purple line is number 3, but this red line is reading very low compared to the other ones right here. So that's EGT1. So if I came over here and went down to EGT1, you'll see it's scaled for 0 to 2000. Now, let's say I made this negative 2000 here, and I hit save. Now you'll see that red line just went up, and it's up much higher in the logger because I pushed it up there because I changed the range of it. Now, if I was to come back in here, make this 0, and let's say I made the max 4000, and I hit save, now it's going to push it way down here. So it's a way to rescale the value itself of the min and maxes to move the data into a different spot of the map. So if I was to come back over here and go to 2000 again, it'll go right back to where it was. And this applies to anything, any of your data points as far as temperatures, pressures, warnings, anything. It's all in here. You can change the scale of all those different points. Okay. The keep graph centered, basically what this does is it'll lock the graph into the centered position for you. I like to be able to move around with it and do stuff, so I do not do the keep graphs centered. The trace value positions, okay, basically what this does is this lets you show the cursor values right here with the points itself. You can show the cursor values at the bottom if you want. Down there, they're hugging that line right there. And then you can show cursor values by field name. That's what I prefer to do, so the data points are all right there next to it. Okay. The alphabetized field lists, what this does is this takes all your points that you have here, okay, and alphabetizes everything. To me, this makes the most sense as far as working with the data points itself. Versus having them grouped non-alphabetically, because if they're alphabetical, you're able to go in there and go to Spark Advance, O2 correction, fuel flow, just look for all those grouped together because they are alphabetized. Okay, our next one's going to be scale the log length on load. This just scales the log itself based on when you load it into the logger appropriately. Now, you can actually have a min number of graphs. I like 8. I like to push as many graphs as possible on there, and up to 30 traces. So basically, you're looking at all the data that you can by looking at the maximum number of graphs and traces. I like to stuff everything on one. You can split these up into 2 different graphs if you would, to have data on the top, data on the bottom. It's up to you. I like putting everything under one view. Okay, the select displayed fields here, what this does is this helps you establish if there's a ton of data down below in your points list that you do not want to see, you can move them over. So for example, on this head temperature, left bank, head temperature, right bank, right here in this section, I could get rid of those very simply by coming over here to the displayed fields section, going down to head temperature, left bank, right bank, hitting this arrow where it says remove selected fields. I'm going to hit OK. Now, if I come over here, those points are gone. Okay, there's no more head temperature, left bank, head temperature, right bank. Now, if I come back over here and let's say I want to bring it back in, select displayed fields, come back over to the H's. Again, now I'm going to choose add selected fields, and I'll push it over. Now, this will push everything over. Okay, this will add all, remove all. We don't want to do that, but you can if you want, but in this case, I don't. Going to hit OK, I'm going to go back up here, and there's my head temperature left bank, head temperature right bank, all right there for you. Okay, so that basically will just show you how the points are populated. The points down below, by simply clicking on the empty box, will populate each data point. So by just simply clicking on the box, you will then be able to bring up that point. Now, if you do not like the color of the box, you would just simply right click on it and you would just pick another color. So right there came up as orange, but let's just say I wanted to make it yellow. Okay, now I've made that curve yellow. Head temperature left bank is now yellow. Okay, and again, turn them off and on by just simply pressing the box. And when you're done, the tune-up will, the project will save all your configuration files here, okay, as far as how your data logger is set up. So the next here we have to do is called a quick trace selection. Now, when we do this, this is basically going to let you choose and configure everything using a window pane on the left. It's not going to be pre-built automatically. You can build your data logger exactly how you want to do it. So you got to restart the software, which we'll do right now, and then we'll come back into it to show you how this works. Okay, so now we've restarted the software, back inside our logger. Now you can see here that we still have our data points down below, but if I try to left click on any of these points, I can't do anything with them. They're all just locked in there down below, okay? Now what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to come over here and start configuring all these different graph sections to actually configure what points you wanna be shown, all right? So if I was to come over here and just pick injector gross pulse with average, okay, now I'm actually going to build it, but let's just say I actually want an injector gross pulse average below the TPS, and I didn't want it actually there anymore. This is how you can custom build the logger to actually show those certain values of whatever you're looking for, okay? So this lets you configure the log completely dependent on however you want the actual lines to be shown in the logger. When you do the quick trace selection, it simply puts everything up there for you by when you just left click on a box, it'll load up in there for you. With this here, you're basically going to configure everything as far as how you want it to look from the actual data points themselves. You're going to move everything around and put everything up there as far as how you want it to look. So this is takes more time to set up. It's not as convenient as the quick trace selection, but you have full control over your logger itself as far as exactly how the data looks. Now when you're done with it, you'll probably want to choose this hiding field select, because then what it does is it pushes it over to the left. Now you're actually just looking at everything based on how you've got your logger configured, but it's still there. It's just going to hide it. Okay. So you can use that guy to set up everything as far as, your look. It would just simply be you cannot work with these points anymore down below. They'll all still work. You just can't simply just left click on the box and actually do work with it. It's all got to be configured from over here in this section now as far as configuring all your different graphs. All right. So when you're done with it, or if you want to go back to the quick view, you can just say, I want to choose quick trace selection. And again, you got to restart the software, and we'll go back into it now to get back into the software to continue editing with the quick trace view instead. Okay, so now that we've got everything configured the way that you want to have as far as the layout and the look, there's a couple items that you're going to want to be aware of here that's very powerful in the software. The first is there's a bar down here with these little wisps down here that actually will show you data. If you hold with the left mouse button and scroll across, it'll actually give you the minimum, the maximum, and the averages of that data set that you've now highlighted, okay? So you can see here that basically in high gear, the minimum spark advance was 19.28 degrees. The max spark advance was 21.6 degrees. Now, if I look in high gear at this exact combo, I had a minimum of 20.6 pounds of oil pressure and a max of 38.7 pounds of oil pressure. So I'm actually going down in oil pressure, and that simply shows it right there. This is actually the purple line here that you see starting up high and going down low, indicating that something is definitely wrong with the oil pressure on there. So you can see it here that it's going down, but it's nice that it actually shows you in that view. You can see that big delta of -17 on the oil pressure. It can spell it out to you right away that something's going on. So nice quick way to go ahead and look at some values there as far as averages, min and maxes. Now, another thing you're going to want to be aware of is smoothing. Okay, you'll see next to here, next to each point, there's an S value. Okay, now the green line here that looks very jagged right here, okay, is actually the spark advance. Now, this has no smoothing whatsoever applied. I don't like putting any smoothing on the timing because a tenth of a degree of timing can be quite a bit, a lot of times. And you can see here that this timing goes extremely low in this car, about 1 degree way out here. And you can just see it just dip way down far, and then it comes back up. So if I wanted to apply some smoothing on this point or any point for that fact, you would just simply left click on it and you could do a field smoothing, okay, and that puts it to a 2, and you can see it gets rid of a lot of those lines and really cleans it up, okay. Now, I don't really recommend, again, the smoothing on the spark, but you can do it if you'd like. This way, I just take it away. And what you're going to also want to do is on this acceleration Y point, okay? This is typically the point that is used in most loggers for the actual G meter itself here, okay? So it's this red line right here. You can see it takes off, it holds pretty well, and then it comes back down during the run, okay? Now, a smoothing value of 32 is going to be your best bet for whether it's your X or your Y axis. Now, if I got rid of the smoothing factor, you can see here that it's very fast, and it's actually doing that in real time. That's the actual G meter itself in working time, but you really can't read anything from that. So field smoothing of 32 is basically the same exact type of look, if you would, as far as a race pack goes. It sits right on top of it. I've done this many times with the smoothing value of 32, and it sits right on top of the race pack. So very good number to work with as far as a smoothing factor for the G meter itself, okay? So now that we've actually got everything configured and we're looking at everything, we're looking all around, now what we want to do is we actually want to apply the data that we actually have over here on our curves and on our tables. So the first thing you're going to want to do here is look and see here that I have a nice tail built into this guy. So as you can see, as the car is launching, there's a tail that's coming down here from 4470 RPM up to around 6781. Now, if the table you're looking at does not have this table or this tail, what you're going to want to do is choose history trace length, okay? The default that I like to use is about 400. So if I made it 0, okay, and I came back over here, now there's no tail at all. You see that the tail is now gone. So right click on it again, history trace length, I'm going to make it 400. Okay, and now as I'm moving around here, now I've got a nice tail to work from here that I can see, okay? You can make that longer, all depends on what you feel comfortable with. That's the fuel table. Same thing with the spark advance table. Just you gotta put your tails out there. So you're gonna wanna use that history trace length feature to make that there, okay? So let's just say that for some reason this car was running fat, and I wanted to make adjustments. Well, you can see here that I'm just sitting up there in the fuel table in that upper right-hand corner gear. Well, it just goes the same thing as if you're adjusting it in real time. You can highlight a section here, and if you want to subtract a certain number out of it, you can add a certain number, multiply it. What you have to remember here with the software is if you were to decrease it by 10%, you would multiply by 0.9. If you wanted to raise it by 20%, like it says, you would multiply by 1.2, all right? So you can do that in real time or offline in the project, however you wanted to do it, all right? But you can simply make your adjustments on these tables over here and then apply it to the project, to the ECU the next time you turn it back on, or do it in real time as well. Now, what you're going to want to remember is if you're doing it in real time on the ECU, there's no burn button here. So when you're all done in your logger section, you're making adjustments, you're going to have to go find a table. I'll typically just pick the fuel table, and the burn button will be red because you haven't burned it in yet. So make sure you hit the burn when you're online with the ECU, making the adjustments over here on the logger side, all right? So now what we want to do is go to our traction control settings here, and let's say we have an SR2 desired driveshaft table, and we want to actually load in our driveshaft curve, okay? So you can see here that these are the actual SR2 driveshaft curves for this vehicle, and the purple is the actual driveshaft curve itself. Now, how do we get that in there, okay? It's very simple. What you want to do here is there's 3 dots, okay? And in this log, I've already shown it, but I'm going to get rid of this. And so now my data logger trace of the drive shaft is gone. All right. So if you have a SR2 desired drive shaft table curve that needs to actually look at your drive shaft, you're going to click over here on these three dots in the window, and you're going to show XY data log plot. The x-axis field is going to be the SR2 timer, and you're going to want to choose RPM of toss. Okay, so toss is transmission output speed sensor, or it's our drive shaft sensor, however you want to look at it. But that's the actual data log plot you're going to want to build up or load up. And now you can actually see the drive shaft curve versus your SR2. Now, if I wanted to look at it bigger, I could come over here to the SR2 section. I could highlight this guy, and now I can bring it in and I can look at it much bigger versus the log view. But you can see there that there's my SR2 time versus my actual RPM of my drive shaft sensor. Okay. Now, one thing I want to talk about here briefly is if I was to load up the SR2 time on this log, I come down, I'm going to look in the S's, right? I want to find the SR2 timer, which is right here in the lower right hand corner, SR2 timer. What you're going to want to do is come over here. You see this yellow line right there, okay? Now, if I zoom in on this guy and I see my SR2 timer, there it goes. It starts going up by a tenth. Okay, there's 0. I'm looking at this right up here in my data, and you'll see there's a tenth, there's 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths. What you're going to want to do is you can either right click right when it goes 0, you can right click on this guy to set current time to 0, okay, or you can press Control 0. So now when I press that to 0, now I've actually got all my times going here as far as there's 2.68 seconds in the run. Okay, there's 3/4 of a second. So now you can actually look at where your data is and zero it out versus what's going on. So now this 1 second or so that I'm looking at over here is now going to be lined up here with my logger itself as far as what time it's actually at. Okay, so very important as far as getting your drive shaft curves. You want to hit the three dots, and you're going to want to simply load up the x-axis field as SR2 timer, and the RPM toss as the actual variable that you're going to want to look at. All right. So let's just go around and peek around this side of this project here, and we're going to look at the ETM desired drive shaft curves. Again, same thing, SR2 timer, RPM toss is right there. Now, let's just say we actually want to take this and we want to start building some stuff here. Okay, I'm going to load up the big project here, or this big curve, so we can actually look at this better. All right. So what you're going to see here is you're going to see this thing that says Add Edit Data Filter Expression upper left-hand corner. It's this purple line upper left-hand corner. Now, what you can do is to save a lot of time when you're building these curves and these tune-ups here is by actually clicking that guy. It will actually sit your curve, okay, directly over the actual line itself. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to left click, okay, on this line. Okay, now you'll see here it just sat my SR2 drive shaft RPM right on that line. All right, so I literally have a drive shaft curve that will hug this actual drive shaft trace directly on top of it. I mean, I'm sitting right on top of it. Now, what you can do is, if you don't like that, remember, I've got an undo last change button. I can go right back to where it was. All right. Now, if I keep this window open, though, I can right click and go right back on top of where it was. Well, let's just say I wanted to actually use this drive shaft curve as my baseline for running everything. Okay. But I don't want to have it sit on. I want to give it a little bit of room. All right. I'm going to highlight this guy here. I'm going to add 100 to it. And now I've got a nice tight curve with that RPM trace of my drive shaft for my timing. Okay, so now what I can do is I can come over here. I'm going to copy this, Control C, and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go over to my drive shaft curve number 2, and I'm going to give it a little bit more room. I've copied it, I pasted it. I'm going to hit the plus sign. I'm going to add 100 more. Okay, now I've got 200 RPM over drive shaft RPM 1 trace. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to curve 3. I'm going to paste the same curve again. Okay, now I'm going to add 200 to this one. And there you go. So now I have 3 different curves. If I want to get after it, I could give it a lot of room here with number 3. If I want to be really tight on it, I can be really on top of it with curve number 1. If I wanted to completely just get everything up out of the way, or just give it a ton of room, for example, I could highlight everything, go 300, and now the curves are way up out of the way. But you can see how powerful the software is to move all your tune-up information around, and how quick it was by simply using this guy here to this add edit data filter expression to sit on top of it. This way it just saves you a ton of time if you're trying to go in here and take a dot and move it around, and which you totally can do. You can take these dots one by one and just sit it on top of it if you want. But you can use that data log filter expression to bring your data points much closer and then start working with that as well, okay? But you are more than welcome to use any of these data points here to work from, completely manual. It's up to you, and you'll see that those numbers are changing in the background. All right, so that configures that guy for all your traction control tune-ups and all your tables as far as SR2 and ETM as well, okay? Now that we've covered all of this, another nice feature about the actual logger is the fact you can actually watch the run in real time. So if I was to come out here in the gauge cluster tab, I still have all my actual tabs, dashboards, everything's all available to me here, right? I got my tuning and dyno views here, okay? So let's say I want the tuning and dyno views and I actually want to watch this run. I would come over here, this lower right hand corner, where it says start playback, okay? And now I'm actually inside the run in real time working. So if I come back on the left hand side over here, there's a blue line over here. It's going to take off and keep going. Now you're actually watching the run in real time, launching, and there's your AFRs, and depending on how you have your project configured, you're going to watch everything in real time. Car's spooling up, it's going, it's banging away, and there you go. And you can actually watch everything in real time on the actual log itself. You can come over here to your gauge clusters. You can look anywhere you want. It's just going to replay all your data on any one of your windows that you have open here. Okay, here's my corrections. There's my AGTs all going right there. Here's my DAE, DAE2. So all these windows will be running, and you can watch it in real time, just as if you were right there on the actual pass itself, which is very nice. So you can stop it if you want, as far as the actual playback goes. So if I was to come over here, and there are other features you can, as far as advancing, page forward, page back, you can increment up one little line at a time here, okay? So you have a little menu here. You have a zoom in feature. It just depends on how you actually want to use this logger, but you can look at everything in real time, just as if you were using it, okay? So if I was to go back now to the graphing and logging section, everything's configured as far as how you want to use it here. Again, all your data is going to be displayed. It's very powerful as far as how it works when looking at all of your data. And there's going to be more updates coming out for this guy as far as how the logger works. One thing you want to remember, if you do have the full version of the software, you have a notes tab up here. You can hit the notes tab and start populating in any notes you have on all your runs. That does come with the full version of the software. But hopefully this gives you a better idea of how the software does work, and you're able to bounce around. There's one more thing you're going to want to know how to do here is, and we have a compare log feature, okay? So what this does is this lets you allow a second log to be compared to the current log that you're looking at. And this is very powerful because if you want to just overlay certain traces here, you can do that. So if I go compare log, and let's just say I want to compare it to another tune-up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a whole new curve here, okay? Because you can see here I've got a bunch of different tabs I've created. There's a new tab here. I'm going to call it, it's called a quick view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this engine RPM. Okay. I'm going to go okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of everything and only have engine RPM displayed. So I'm going to turn off all these points look at, actually, I'm going to look at the SR2 timer as well, because that's actually how you line everything up. All right. So now I have everything turned off except for engine RPM and the SR2 timer. Okay. And there's my 2 runs right there. So what we want to do here is, you'll see here that the SR2 timers are not lined up for these guys. What we need to do is we have to have these sit on top of each other in order to work correctly, because you can see here this SR2 timer starts here and this SR2 timer starts back over here. All right, so what you can do here is, upper left hand corner below the start data log button, I've got a cursor here. Okay, so what you want to do is start dragging it from right to left, and you'll see your new, or the other curve you're working with, okay, here very closely. Now there you go, I've just dragged it on top, and now I can see here that the SR2 timer is right with each other. Okay, and then what you're going to want to do is look at your data and go through it as best you can with both of these curves now highlighted. So you can see here that this gray curve actually had more RPM. It just dipped down like this one did, but this one went way far out on the shift point versus the other unit itself. So very easy to overlay your data. Just simply do the compare log. These buttons over here are used to dial in the trace. I just dragged it with the bar. Okay, you can do the bar here, left and right. But let's just say the SR2 timers aren't lining up appropriately. So you'll see here I've got 2.54 and 2.61 up here on the actual section where it actually has the RPM engine. You would want to come over here and use this arrow here, and you would actually start lining up the, this arrow here. You would use this arrow to come over here and configure the time so that they actually line up on top of each other. And there you go. So very simple to do. Get your logs right on top of each other, and you can look at your data better and analyze what actually is working good. If you also want to set the current time to 0, remember we showed you that before also as well. So right there is where the timers go. Hit Control-0 or right click. Okay, now everything's zeroed. And now you can look out there and look at everything in the run. So that's pretty much everything in the logger that you're ever going to have to worry about. Quick trace views are very powerful to create them, depending on what exact data you do want to look at and check out. Overlays are obviously very important, but hopefully you've got enough out of this here. Now you can go into your data and make very good decisions based on what you're looking at there. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, send us a DM or an email. Thanks for checking out this video. Please share, like, and subscribe. Appreciate checking it out. Thank you.